Okay, so good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this second day of the GASL Multi-Stakeholder Partnership Western Europe Consultation. This is one of 8 regional chapters organized between May and August. And the results of this regional consultation will feed into the main multi-stakeholder meeting in October in Ireland. So for this specific Western Europe consultation meeting, it was organized by Fritz Schneider, the former chair of the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock and now consultant to the FAO, as well as Eduardo Arce Diaz from the Agenda Support Team at FAO Rome, and Lavinia Scudiero, also from the AST in Rome. I'm doing the moderation. I'm Nancy Bourgeois-Lutti from the School of Agricultural, Forest and Food Sciences in Zollikofen in Switzerland, and I'm co-chairing the Academia and Research Cluster of the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, together with Rogerio Mauricio. The regional consultation, the Western Europe consultation, was held for the first time yesterday already in the morning. I guess quite a few of you attended already. And today is the last day of this meeting, which will last until approximately 11:45. And the aim of this consultation is to focus on actions and commitments of stakeholders towards sustainable livestock solutions in the 3 spheres of GASL's theory of change. So the sphere of control, the sphere of influence, and the sphere of interests, and focusing also on the 4 sustainability domains that we have, and you see here on the screen. So the livelihood and economic growth, the role of livestock for food and nutrition security, animal health and animal welfare, as well as climate and natural resource use. Over 200 people were invited. I think approximately 40 registered, or a little bit more than 40, and not all of them joined yesterday, so I hope that more will join today. Eduardo, next slide, please. So today's program, after my introduction words, there will be a report about yesterday's outcome by Fritz, who is our rapporteur for this meeting. And then we will have a series of keynote speakers. So Dion is first for the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform, then Jürg Zaug from Nestle, both based in Switzerland, I guess. Then a report from Xin Huang from the International Meat Secretariat, IMS. And then finally, Emmanuel Coste from France, report about the Confédération Nationale d'Élevage, the CNE. And then, like yesterday, we will have a panel discussion with our speakers, and I believe Dale Craman will join from Ireland as well. And then we will have concluding remarks from Fritz, and maybe Shirley Tarawali, our chair, will do the closing words, but this is still to be confirmed. She's not sure she can make it for the time. Next slide, please, Eduardo, thank you. So as a reminder about GASL's theory of change, so we have, so this matrix was developed considering these 3 spheres, the ones of interest, the one of influence, the one of control, and highlighting also the role of GASL and the activities of GASL, focusing on evidence and practice change, focusing on the dialogue, and focusing on the policy change. And the outputs from today will feed into this matrix and hopefully contribute, but I have no doubt about that, contribute to advance our actions to make livestock more sustainable and livestock's role in food systems more sustainable. So with this, I would like to hand over the word to Fritz to report about yesterday's outcomes of the first session. Fritz.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you everybody for joining. As soon as we have the, I'm very happy to use the template for GASL's MSP in Ireland for the first time. I like it very much, and it's nice to have such a template for the presentations then in Ireland. So I'll give you a short summary of the day. Next slide, please. The program has already been shown. We had several inputs, and then we had a panel discussion with all the speakers of yesterday. Next slide, please. We had about 20 participants. Nancy introduced the meeting program as just now, and Shirley sets the scene and puts the regional meeting into the context of GASL as an and the upcoming MSP meeting in early October in Ireland. Then we had the first presentation from Daniel Brecher, Agroscope. That's the agricultural research institution in Switzerland with a focus of Switzerland. He showed us the development of the greenhouse gas emissions in Switzerland and the reduction potential and ongoing projects. He also showed the long-term perspectives and showed environmental options of the Swiss population diets. Next slide, please. Ulf Magnusson, with the country focus of Sweden, he showed the benchmarking of sustainability in the Swedish livestock sector and showed that Sweden has very rigorous standards. As examples, he showed the very low use of antibiotics in livestock in comparison to other countries. He also mentioned that to be successful, you need dedicated, well-educated farmers, which is the case in Sweden. He also showed the challenge of animal source food and the criminal attacks by activists, which are quite frequent. He mentioned the game changers such as the Corona and the Ukraine war, and the consequences, reduction of pigs and poultry production, and grain growers as the winners as the grain prices are going up very substantially. And he mentioned that we come from a food security concern to societal public concern due to these game changers. Next slide, please. Dale Drummond, the country focused on Ireland. Ireland will be our host, so that was very important to get first insight. He concentrated on Origin Green and showed us that Ireland is actually an export-oriented agricultural country. The standards, again, are very high. They have a sustainability charter, and he showed the Food Vision 2030 with a sustainability strategy at farm level, company level, domestic and global levels. He also showed the importance of the reference to the SDGs, which are the reference frame, and he mentioned that it is very important to properly communicate, and there is a room for improvement for everybody. Next slide, please. Andrea Rosati from EAAP with the European focus and the science focus. Sustainable livestock options are included in global development programs and resourcing. Sustainability, an overarching topic in the EAAP. We have excellent reach within the European livestock sector with EAAP, and EAAP makes a sector and its challenges visible. There is a strong focus to inform policymakers. It is reaching to 4,600 scientists, mostly in Europe. Next slide, please. The panel. We had a very interesting panel discussion, and it definitely whets the appetite to have more discussions face-to-face in Ireland. For instance, improvements in Europe have limits. A lot has been done already. That was mentioned by Switzerland and Sweden. Efficiency gains in low and middle income countries have a good potential. In Ireland, they're a bit more optimistic. Countries have huge ambitions, also companies. They'll mention the DSM programs and products, and the emissions have to decline. Only 20% is emitted in Europe and North America. Next slide, please. 80% is from other parts of the world. So we definitely also need to concentrate on other parts of the world. Potential for improvements in Africa and Asia in that sense are enormous. countries, farmers have to take responsibility, even if the prospects are low. And we also mentioned briefly the feed-food competition of the livestock sector. Next slide, please. It was also mentioned that socioeconomic aspects are not sufficiently considered. We should look at the relationship Asia and Europe. And we also realized that in Europe, there is a jungle of initiatives on country level, but also on the international level. Challenges with consumers focus on nutrition, and pilots will eventually enter into policy, for instance, in Switzerland and Sweden, longevity of dairy cows. Next slide, please, I think. It was also mentioned that we should make use of key messages that scientists should not try to implement because they are poor communicators, and communication needs to be more professional. And Grassland direct the public money towards more sustainable systems, and the policy framework should make this possible. I think that's the last slide, Eduardo. Yeah, thank you very much. This is just a short summary of what we have discussed yesterday. I'm sorry for this very bullet point type of presentation. I'm looking forward to today's presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Fritz. Before I hand over to Dionys, I just remind you that you can post your questions in the chat and we will tackle them in the panel discussion later on. So now I would like to give the word to Dionys Forster, who is the director of the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform, the so-called SAI platform. And Dionys will give us great insights into some aspects of the work of the SAI platform. Dionys, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you for inviting us to this event. Not sure, should I share my screen or do you have it on your screen? I can share it right away. That's
yes,
good.
Please. I think
okay.
It's good if you share directly. Yeah. Thank you.
I share it. Yes, so thanks a lot again for the invitation. Let me just move to the second slide. Yes, I'm Director General of the SAI platform. What is the SAI platform? The SAI platform is an industry organization, a non-for-profit organization that exists nowadays for more than 20 years. And it has many food and drink beverage members. We're going to see that just in a slide. So our aim is to, let's say, develop a sustainable and thriving and resilient agriculture sector that protects the Earth's resources, human rights, and animal welfare. So I think we have quite something to contribute here on the livestock side. We do that mainly through collaborative action. We wanted to harness the power of our members. So we develop projects together. We work on themes and we develop also industry solutions. And some of them we're going to see now. This is just an overview of some of the members. They are not all. Nowadays we have almost 160 members among the very big ones, the Nestle's, the Danone's, the Unilevers, as manufacturers, but also processors and as well retailers. We have also affiliate members, such as input companies, agriculture input companies, companies that provide pesticides, and so on and so forth. We have 3 working groups. One is on crops and 2 are on livestock. One is on the beef, and SAI platform is hosting the European Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, which is a multi-stakeholder roundtable to address the sustainability challenges of the European beef sector. It's really, the idea is really to recognize the beef value chain with all what it is doing in terms of sustainability. There are mainly 4 areas. One is the environment, the other one is animal welfare and health. There is something about animal medicine, and there's something about generally the management, the farm management. We are present with the ERBS in 6 European countries. These are regional platforms, means not national platforms, regional platforms, where a good number of the national members are participating. So we are in United Kingdom, Ireland, Poland, Germany, France, and Italy. And we intend to expand to other, let's say, regions in the coming future. In view of the theory of change and how we contribute to the sphere of interest, sphere of influence, and the control, I would like to draw your attention to first the sphere of interest and to the evidence of and practice change. Here it's really about unite the implementation and the action on the ground towards an aligned, towards an aligned outcome and target metrics to provide a recognition for the European beef sector. When it's about the dialogue, it's all about act as a cohesion point for the European beef sector across the value chain, but also providing an aligned framework for targets that unites then again the different players in the platforms. These platforms then decide on their own what are the best, let's say, measures, the best best messages to take locally. In terms of the policy change, it's a kind of a general, it's a targeted advocacy communication to policymakers. It's a general communication in public available tools in terms of websites, social media, and this is going to be hold true for all the other areas as well. In the sphere of influence, it is basically the RBS is a line of sight to the global goals of the GRSB, the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. In the dialogue element, it's about influencing the global beef agenda through the GRSB and work with other national and regional beef sustainability roundtables. So a dialogue with other sector collaborations across Europe. Again, the policy change, the communication, it's a kind of a targeted advocacy. In the sphere of control, this is where we have seen it. We have established through the RBS, let's say, 8 outcome targets in 4 priorities, beef sustainability outcomes, based on the materiality assessment and the public consultation. So with a framework to recognize the existing programs in the different countries and done by and implemented by the different member organizations. In the dialogue, we're working together with processors, producers, processors, aligned industries, but also retailers. The platform in the countries is established across Europe, and currently, what I mentioned before, we are present in 6 countries. Again, at the end, the policy change is basically member-targeted advocacy communications inside the ERBS, inside site platforms, providing tools, processes, and guidelines. So this is something that we are developing for our members together with them. Coming to the second group, it is the dairy working group. The dairy working group is a pre-competitive and trustworthy cooperation between the dairy buyers and the processors. It is focusing on thriving the development and push the sustainability in dairy. Globally, the members in the dairy working group represent about 30% of the global dairy milk volume. So it's quite a substantial volume, and from that point of view, we have quite a large outreach. We have especially one solution. We're going to see that solution in the next slide. It's the Sustainable Dairy Partnership, which is a B2B solution that we develop as part of the dairy group. We see this B2B solution on this slide. Basically, the idea is we have a lot of dairy programs in the different countries. And the idea is that we recognize these dairy programs and we develop a reporting solution, a B2B solution that allows to report the sustainability KPIs from the dairy processes to the dairy buyers. So for that, we align on the KPIs. we align on the way how the buyers can get access, and we offer that to the members. Coming to the theory of change, the sphere of interest, the dairy is we are developing this sustainable dairy partnership to demonstrate really this continuous improvement at farm level through the B2B industry framework. On the dialogue side, we are recognizing existing programs, that's what I just mentioned, existing national programs, and we reinforce them, we try to eliminate duplications of efforts and create a global language for the dairy sustainability. On the policy side, it's similar to what we have seen in the ERBS. It's targeted advocacy communication to policymakers and industry associations. In the second line of the dairy, it is still in the sphere of interest. We try to align with the dairy sustainability framework to have a global umbrella that will harmonize our approach with global efforts. Also there, communication and the policy change communication is targeted. If we come to the sphere of influence, we have in Europe now 16 dairy processes. Again, I mentioned dairy working group includes 50% of the global 20 dairy companies, but in Europe we have 16. In the sphere of dialogue, or in the dialogue, it's really influencing the global dairy agenda through the dairy sustainability framework, where we are also part of. I will leave out the policy change. In the sphere of control, we are working on this online reporting hub that captures the sustainability KPIs, that we align on the KPIs, and we have then this reporting hub, and we align on the access to the data. So it will be allowing you, for instance, as a processor, if you are buying from different cooperatives that delivers milk with different sustainability KPIs, to get an aggregated sustainability KPI for all the milk that a manufacturer has bought from the processor. On the dialogue side, it's there we work with the producers, we work with the processors, traders, allied industries, retail, and national programs and others. And then on the policy side, we are having the member targeted advocacy communications. We have tools, we have processes, we have guidelines, but also general communication. Good. And I think with that, I come to the end and I give back the word to Nancy.
Thank you very much, Dionys, for this presentation. Very interesting to see the outreach of the SAI platform. It indicates also the scope of your responsibility or your members' responsibility, but also the leverage, the potential leverage for improvements towards sustainability. What is interesting also is to see the way you work in a decentralized manner in the beef sector and the dairy. So we will come back to this in the panel discussion. Thanks a lot, Dionys. Now I would like to hand over the word to Jürg from Nestlé, so one of the members of the SAI platform. So Jürg, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Oh, hello everybody, nice to meet you. So can you see the presentation well? Is it okay? Okay, so maybe go to the next slide. So maybe just to introduce myself. So my name is Jürg Zaug. I grew up on a dairy farm actually in Switzerland. I've been with Nestlé for the last 20 years, mainly in Asia, in Pakistan, India, and China. I was always in operations, and now since 1 year, I'm in research and development here in Switzerland. It's the focus on climate and natural resource use for the dairy sector. Now, when I saw the topic of this conference today, the livestock sector actions towards more sustainable food systems, of course, I was thinking of my own job. What have I been doing for the last 20 years? And being in the markets, it was always about, the livelihood and economic growth of our farmers. We call this ensuring supply. we have to make sure that actually the farmers are there, they can produce, they can also produce in next month and next year and in 10 years. Then the red box, the food and the nutrition security, of course, this is the main role of the food sector, food industry. So of course, for us is more the food safety. That is an important point. But of course, also we play an important role in this. And animal health, animal welfare, I will put this a bit in the category of course, of productivity at farm level, but also the consumer expectations is strongly in there. And now the last box is climate, natural resource. So I decided to make a short presentation on its focus on this topic because that's my current role to find solutions which we can use to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of the dairy sector. So clearly it's just a view from the industry, from the Nestle as an example for discussion. And it's clear it's a holistic approach. We have to cover all these 4 boxes. There's no point to focus on one and to forget about the other. It's holistic. We have to always keep an eye on all of that. So go to the next one, please. So as a Nestle example, we have to define the ambition. Where do we want to end up at the end of the journey? And this is what you see on the right bottom corner. This is the net zero. This is what most of, I think, of your companies or other stakeholders are aiming for, net zero by 2050. Then, of course, we have to do a baseline. And in Nestle, we did that in 2018. That's on the left pillar. That's our baseline where we use different tools. We use the Cool Farm tool, which has been implemented in all our markets where we are sourcing raw materials. But there are also other tools, and we are also actively engaging to improve these tools. These tools are not perfect at the moment, but I think it's as good as it gets for the time being. But we hope, or we are contributing to make them better. Then we need a roadmap, and this is a bit the middle section of this slide. So we have some short-term targets. For example, it's a bit small, but you can see we want to use 100% renewable electricity in all our sites. It means all our factories, our offices, etc. by 2025. Then we want to make sure that all our packaging is recyclable or reusable by also 2025. So these are very concrete projects where there's a lot of drive, a lot of investment going into it to achieve that. So the short-term or the near-term goal is kind of 2025 to reduce by 20%. Then there's a bit of a longer-term target, like by 2030. And there you see the little red box in scaling up. Actually, we are not so sure how to do it. And I think most probably, based on what Fritz has shown from yesterday's discussion, I think nobody really is sure how to do it or what to do. But I think that's the journey where we are on, and especially now in my function in research and development, that's what we are. We want to find solution, and we want to find science and technology to hopefully move in this direction. Then if you go to the next one. So this all of you have seen that ad libitum, of course, the footprint. So we have to analyze a bit where are the main drivers like feed production, enteric fermentation, and the manure. That's where we are focusing. And in our case, we focus strongly on the enteric fermentation and on the manure. Next. Now, you may think like, why Nestle is focusing on enteric fermentation? And this, of course, we have some R&D capabilities on the human side. Like we have a lot of programs about products which are good for your stomach, which are good for your digestion. And there are, of course, there are synergies, or there are some insights or some technologies which actually can be used. Now, so we have a team in Lausanne in our Nestle Research Center, which are really actually specialists in some of this of the digestion system, of all the processes which happen there. And now with them, actually, they are looking at feed supplements. And also it has been mentioned yesterday, you spoke about DSM. So some of these products are actually available commercially. We still feel a need to test them, also to have some long-term tests to really ensure that this has the long-term effect which is expected. And of course, some of these technologies, they are not approved everywhere in the world. They are maybe approved in Europe or in in South America and some countries, but not in Asia. But there's a lot of research going into it from Nestle and from other organizations to try to improve the feeding, and of course the footprint of the feed, and then the enteric fermentation. There are other ideas, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. That you see the small picture with this little device, the variable device of the cow. Now this is kind of like it should capture the methane, then it will oxidize it into CO2, which will reduce the footprint. Now this is just at the beginning of the journey, and sometimes as a joke, people say like, "What do you think a cow are going to like to wear that?" Then we always say like, "Look, if you come to Switzerland, you see all the cows wearing bells. Now, do you think they are liking to wear that?" So who knows? Maybe in 20 years or 10 years or 30 years, maybe the cows will walk around like that, and everybody will think this is the normal way. Clearly, there will be plenty of discussion also with consumers or the customers, if this is right, if this is wrong. Let's see how this journey goes. There are other approaches like vaccination. This is a bit of at the early stage of the pipeline. This is still quite a long shot, but we know there are many things happening there as well. And what else can be done? Also genetics. I think that's where some of you are the specialists in this. Not all the cows are emitting the same amount of methane. So we can also try to do through some natural selection or some breeding programs to find the best possible. So with this, there's already a good potential to reduce the greenhouse gases from the cow. If you go to the next one. So then the second focus where we put our efforts is actually on the manure. And again, as everybody knows, so there's a cycle of the nutrient cycle from the feed to the cow, to the manure, and back to the land. So our effort is to reduce the losses at the manure side, again, with different technologies or different methods like plant carbon. This is a very old technology, and there are some experiments which are being conducted to see what will be the impact. Then the separation, which more a mechanical side between the liquid and the solid, also compost making, or then the biodigesters, biogas production, precision fertilization. Now, all of them are actually, or most of them are not really new. Now, where we are actually quite interested is to see the combination of them. For example, to use plant carbon or biochar in a biodigester and to see what will be the effect on that. Or to take the separation and to put some additives, some of them are natural, some of them are chemical, to see what will be the impact on the emission, like especially on the nitrous oxide and on others, to optimize it. And we see there are some actually interesting learnings which are going on, and we will test that and we will see how it goes. If you go to the next one. Now how to roll this out. Like if you can see in the two previous slides, actually we talk about solutions or experiments or technical or tools or methods. Now, how to bring this from a laboratory or from a research center down to the hundred thousands of farms which are supplying fresh milk to Nestle. So we have kind of a three-pronged approach. On the top left, we have research farms. So we have a small number of research farms. Either some belong to Nestle, but of course, most of them, they belong to universities, or some of them are maybe very progressive farmers. On those farms, we're really doing the research. We try to discover, to identify, and to develop new technologies for this reduction of greenhouse gases. Once some is also done in laboratories on the farm or off farm. Once we have such a solution, where we are more or less confident that this could be a good case, we take this to the reference farms, which is on the upper right side. We have currently about 40 of such farms. These are the best commercial farms which are there, like these are our suppliers. And then on these farms, we implement these solutions and we validate them in a practical environment. Like this could be And we will look at the economical side of it. We will also look at the operational side. Is the kind of farmer manage it? Is it simple enough? Is it also a robust technology? Does it also work when it's raining, or does it only work when there is sunshine? So it's really a on-site practical approach. We will do that in different parts of the world, like in the different climatic conditions. We will try to do it on large farms, on small farms, like on the whole range of farms which represent our supply chains. Based on that, hopefully we will be able to approve or to validate technologies, and then we will kind of make it's like a menu where we can say in a certain, let's say in a certain farming system or in certain climatic condition, these are the solution or potential solution which the farmer could apply. But then of course it's the farmer who has to decide themselves. They are entrepreneurs, they have their own profit and loss, they have their own restrictions in terms of labor and also economical situation. But we will, our milk sourcing teams in the markets, we will kind of support the farmers that they have access to these technologies, and then based on what they want to do, they can select them or they can do something else. In the later stage, maybe in the coming years, there will be also a price, of course. There will be a financial either incentive will be there for a practice, or there will be an incentive for a carbon reduction or for a carbon sequestration. So this is kind of all in progress, but we feel this journey or this pipeline from research farms to reference farms to supplier farms, this is absolutely necessary, because in our case we have hundreds of thousands of farms, and of course we cannot reach them all at once by ourselves. So we need this kind of this outreach farms to do also to find local solution. If you go to the next one. So this, we call this the discover, develop, deploy the journey. And all the farms are totally different. And these are actually farms where I was personally involved in my career around the world. So every farm has a totally different environment, a totally different approach. But there are a few success criteria for solution, which I'm totally convinced that they have to be locally adopted. That's the most important thing. A solution in Switzerland is maybe totally useless in China, or is totally useless in Pakistan. Then it has to be economical viable for the farmer. If it doesn't bring a financial benefit for the farmers, no farmer will ever do it. So it has to make economical sense. And the last and not least, the third point there, it has to be simple and operational efficient for the farmer. Like, I grew up on the farmer. When I spoke with my own dad or granddad, if I came with a proposal which was too complicated, they always had a very short answer about this. And when we talk with farmers, that's exactly what they are telling us. Farmers are busy people, and they are actually a bit overloaded, and we cannot make their life more complicated. Actually, we have to make their life simpler in order that we can have a chance to roll out these solutions and to have an impact with them. Then below in the left lower corner, there are a few requirements. Of course, all the solutions which we are promoting or proposing, they have to be compliance with regulatory. This is quite a challenge in this world. Every country has a bit different rules. Then from a Nestlé business point of view, of course, the milk nutritional quality, the sensory, the milk, the food safety, this has to be absolutely a given. We cannot take any risk on that. Then animal health and welfare, the solutions have to match that. And last but not least, the consumer must be willing, he must be able to understand what we're trying to do, and he or she must be willing to pay for it in one way or the other. So this is kind of the simple summary of this thing. So go to the next one. I think that's my last slide. So if I come back to that, it's a chain. The whole thing is linked to each other. So the people, the profit, the food safety, the animals' nature, everything has to match. If one of them is not strong enough, then if a farm is only sustainable from an environmental point of view, but the farm is going bankrupt, it will not help at all. or if it's a beautiful economical system, but it degrades the local resources, the water or the soil, it's also no point. Then in the introduction, Fritz, you mentioned that somebody said yesterday that, of course, in some markets, actually, we are already at a very high level. It's maybe difficult to improve. However, I think every farm can improve, every farm. In not, of course, not the same amount, and maybe not in the same field, but there's no perfect farm, there's no perfect system. Every system can become better, and in Nestle we call this continuous improvement. Sometimes even many small steps of improvement, actually, they can still create a good improvement. Of course, in some markets where the production is very low, of course, there's a much higher potential. I think there are some quick wins, but I think even the Swiss farmers with whom we are talking, even they still see a good potential. They are still open for new ideas and stuff like that. And then last but not least, of course, everybody plays a role. We cannot do it alone. The farmer cannot do it alone. Nestle cannot do it alone. I think the retail cannot do it alone. The academia cannot do it alone. Government cannot do it alone. It's all together. So we have to do it together. And now I just want to finish with a few quotes, maybe for inspiration. If you go to the last slide. So I spent a lot of time in China for the last 8 years. So I think it's a Chinese proverb or slogan. It's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think in this journey on greenhouse gas reduction, I think we have to do both. We have to do things together, but then we also have, from time to time, we also have to do it alone. We have to do a few things. We just have to do it. And this is the last point below. It's with the call to action, which is, I use that sometimes internally in the company when we have a little bit too many discussions about what all can go wrong. Sometimes we just say, just forget it, just do it. Let's do it. Let's see what will happen. And then we can, at least we learn, and then we can move forward. And I think now this is not a critic, of course, to this conference here, but I have been now here for 1 year. I have attended a million conferences. And I think now slowly, we have to stop talking and we have to start doing stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jörg, for your very honest insights. I particularly appreciated your honesty about Nestle's journey into sustainability, saying that you don't know exactly how to reach the goals by 2030. I think that concerns many of us. We know that we have to arrive to a point, but we are not always sure how we will manage it. As you mentioned, there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of research done. Science is always in progress. And as you mentioned, we have to see what to select or how to go to reach these targets. So thanks a lot for this very interesting insights into Nestle's work. Now I would like to hand over the word to Shin. Shin will give us insights into the challenges for the meat industry. Shin, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the kind invitation. Were you okay? All right, I'll let you do the piloting. I'm very pleased to be here to share with you the view from the private sector. Well, I just want to first acknowledge that the first two speakers, excellent speakers that we have had, Jörg and Dionys, have already given you a very excellent view of the complexity of the private sector and the very concrete programs already in place, the very concrete ambitions, and the way they are going to make this happen in real life. So I think that you don't need that kind of presentation from me. So what I would like to focus in is a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit more boring, but I think it's also important, a little bit more on the global structure of the so-called private sector, and how this is represented in the different association, in particular those that have committed to work together with the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock. Could you go to the next slide, please? So I think that our previous speakers have said this very well. We are very, very keen to be part of the solution. You know, we are often criticized for the problems, but really we have been working for a very long time to be part of the solution. You see here that I just have three main themes, and I always smile when I see that now we define sustainable development with a separate box for animal welfare and animal health, which for most of our professionals' career did not exist as a separate box. And certainly for me personally, that was always part of the sustainable development package. If you did not have good animal welfare and good animal health, first of all, that would be a bad business practice, wouldn't make no business sense, and it would be a very bad thing in general to be doing, because there are all kinds of other implications for human and animal health and for environment. And so to me, it was a given that animal health and animal welfare should absolutely be part of our discussions and part of the challenges we want to take on. Next slide, please. So, you know, the private sector, this is not an exhaustive list of what's the private sector, but I just want to remind us, we saw earlier from our previous two speakers, the food companies, the slaughterhouses, the processing plants, feed mills. Let's not forget that we have inputs to animal production as well. The industry associations, which is where I'm coming from. I'm the Secretary General of the International Meat Secretariat, and we have global coverage of let's say, national livestock associations representing the red meat sector. So those are the ruminants and the monogastrics. But there's a separate industry association for poultry. I'll talk about that later. And of course, there's dairy that we already heard from. There are many of these associations are actually statutory levy bodies as well. And so then, you know, you should ask the question, well, do you think this is strictly a private entity, or is this a public-private entity? And I think that really the answer is more that this is more or less a private-public entity. It's some combination of the two. And then most important, you know, farmers are an integral part of many of these organizations, certainly the ones in the lower half. Farmers are by far the majority. Certainly in my association, farmers are by far the majority of the decision makers in these associations. So we also represent farmers. So all this to say that the private sector is, of course, very diverse and very complex. We all understood that, but I thought it worthwhile to nevertheless point this out, that when you think of the private sector, it's not just the big companies. Of course, they are very important, but they are not the only ones that represent the private sector. Next slide, please. Okay, so I call this the cluster of five because in the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, I'm sorry for those of you not already totally familiar with the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, but basically in each of the representative clusters in the global agenda, we are allowed 5 positions. And so these are the 5 positions that have been taken up by the private sector for the livestock, the International Dairy Federation, International Feed Industry Federation, the International Meat Secretariat, the International Poultry Council, and Health for Animals. Okay, so these are all global associations, global reach, which themselves are associations of associations. Many of their members are either national or regional, and this then eventually filters down to the producers. So this is really, if you like, we're very much, at least administratively, at the top of the pyramid. And let me explain to you why I think that this is important also for us to understand, because this actually means, this complexity means that there is, on the one hand, there is this vertical structure, but on the other hand, the complexity of the situation means that this vertical structure does not mean that the message is passed from the top down to the bottom. And as we saw earlier in the examples given by Nestle and by the SAI platform, actually many of these things are coming up from the bottom up and floating up closer to the top. And that's a good thing. Next slide, please. Okay, so just very quickly to say that these associations have made commitments in resources, in time, and also in communications to its membership to this global discussion, not only with the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, but also with the LEAP, which is the Livestock Environment and Performance Assessment, which is more targeted towards technical guidelines for life cycle assessment of livestock supply chains, with a strong focus on greenhouse gas emissions, but also recognizing that there are many other things in environmental impacts, nitrogen cycles, carbon sequestration. So, sequestration, not only just emissions, water, biodiversity, and these initiatives have been in place now for roughly 10 years. And I would say that there is a pretty strong commitment from the global associations to participate in this discussion. But I want to put it forward to you that we need to be creative to find better ways to make this information, or better ways to make more participants willing, enthusiastic to be directly part of these discussions. Next slide, please. Okay, so we heard earlier about the diversity of the livestock production systems. Just a little bit of a reminder why there is this diversity, and it's largely because we are in very different environments, not only in terms of the climate, but also social, economic, and there are very different goals to livestock production systems around the world. And when I first came into this industry, I despaired a little bit at this complexity because I come from a bit also from a scientific background, and I was struggling in my mind to find some sort of unifying theme or some sort of simplification at the top level that would allow us all to have exactly the same message and go exactly the same way. And of course, with the wisdom that comes with Asian experience, I realized that actually we should be embracing the diversity, because this is exactly what makes the livestock sector so interesting. It is perhaps the most diverse agricultural production system, more diverse even than the crops, for example, not in terms of the number of species, but in terms of the number of production systems for similar goals. And so, I mean, there is, of course, the ruminant monogastric difference, but there is also the extensive and intensive difference, and there are the different species. And then even within the same species in the same climatic zones, maybe in different countries, we value different parts of the animal. And so, a very concrete example here in Western countries, we don't value so much the part of the animal, the internal organs, and we very much like the meaty parts, and in fact the premium cuts. And when you move to Asia, actually it's exactly the opposite. And in Asia, in China, for example, where I'm originally from, they very much appreciate the feet, the ears, the nose of the pig, and they make very good use of these other parts. And so there's a huge diversity in the sector. Next slide, please. Okay, Jörg, you pointed this out very nicely in your presentation just now. If the environmental choice is not the economic choice for farmers, and then a farmer can't stay in business. So we need to recognize that. I think that we also need to recognize that within the livestock sector, we're not only emitters of greenhouse gases, we also are actors in carbon sequestration. And this is something, for example, not officially recognized in the international discussions for climate change. They do greenhouse gas accounting for emissions, but not for sequestration. Why is that? Well, they say because it's too complicated. Yes, it's complicated. Of course, it's complicated, but that doesn't mean that we should ignore it. And it's not insignificant. And I think that maybe later Emmanuel might say something about carbon sequestration, for example, in a country like France, where they have very, very ambitious plans for carbon sequestration in pasture lands. And let's not forget that livestock is part of the economy and that it's more than just meat and milk. There are many other products. There are environmental services that are also associated with that currently are not valued because it's complicated or for various reasons. Farmers are not being paid for it. There are also very important environmental services like, soil carbon health, prevention of floods, because good healthy soils, don't erode less easily. So there are many things, the biodiversity in pasture lands that we are currently not being remunerated for. And then finally, just very briefly on the circular economy, the notion there, I think this has been expressed already in previous presentations, that there are many ways in which livestock production systems participate in the economy. The management of manure, for example, is one very important aspect that we must improve on a lot. If we make it completely circular, then manure is not a problem that comes out of livestock. It's actually a very, very valuable resource that we are using to produce other agricultural foods. And just a simple reminder, here in France at least, I believe it's true in many countries, if you want things that are organic, you actually need manure, right? So just a very simple example. Okay, next slide, please. All right, let me do a very quick tour of the 5 global associations. This is dairy, the pathways to dairy net zero. I won't go into the details. This was already well explained by our previous speakers, but just to signal that this was launched, very ambitious, launched very recently, last year. And basically, yes, by 2050, I believe was the number. And I appreciate the sincerity and the honesty in saying, well, we have this ambition, but we don't know exactly how we will do that yet. Well, I think that's fine. I think already showing the ambition is really, really, really a good signal to be sending to the industry within ourselves, but also, of course, to the public. This is also, we also need very much to convince the public that we are doing the right thing, that they can trust us to do the right thing. Next slide, please. We'll move on to feed, I believe. Yes, the International Feed Industry Association. I've listed a number of very specific programs in which IFIF is closely involved, many of them actually working together with the global agenda for sustainable livestock. And feed is often, we often have these very divisive debates about food versus feed. But I think that when we look more closely at how and to be sure, there is a portion of feed that goes to livestock that could be used for human food. But it might not be as large a proportion as people suppose. And I think that's worthwhile for people to understand that the feed industry is also providing a very valuable service in terms of the circular economy and actually using materials that we consider not fit for human consumption, or at least humans don't want it, and we feed it to animals. So it's not true that all feed that's given to animals is something that could be given to humans. Next slide, please. We move on to the next International Poultry Council. And we so far have talked a lot about ruminants, but I think the monogastrics also deserve a bit of a credit in terms of the very strong contributions that they move to food and nutrition security. Yeah, there we go. All right. And so the International Poultry Council then also has very ambitious national targets for how they want to achieve sustainability, but also they have, like many others, targets for greenhouse gas reductions and climate change. And we'll move on to the last one, which is the health for animals. Next slide, please. Okay. let me just focus on the bottom sentence here, that sustainable development cannot be achieved by one company, one sector, nor one country or one region, and we need to do it together. Okay, and I think that that's really a good way to summarize the work of the international associations on behalf of the private sector for sustainable development of the livestock sector, for continuous improvement, to make tomorrow a better place. All of these good things that we want, this can only be done if we are working all together. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think most of us are quite familiar with this, but just some of the shared, if you like, themes that we have amongst the industry associations. We recognize, for example, that when we are talking about livestock production, actually the land use, we often hear that livestock take up so much land around the world, but actually a lot of that land is actually not suitable for crops. And I would even go as far as to say that if you did not use that land for livestock, not only is it a terrible waste of resources because you're not using it, but it can also be environmentally damaging, because all of a sudden now you create other environmental problems that maybe you didn't think about. And so, for example, if you have land that is abandoned, that could become a fire hazard. That could be a problem. You could actually be decreasing your biodiversity by leaving that land to go wild, because bizarrely enough, or I think that we should recognize that pastures are an incredibly biodiverse system. And I think that the scientists have shown that pasture lands are so biodiverse, they're second in biodiversity only to the Amazon tropical type rainforest. And so that means that if you leave abandoned land to just go wild and for whatever to grow on it, that is actually not good for biodiversity either. All right, so basically that's on many benefits to grassland. Of course, we discussed also earlier about the importance of good soil health, organic matter, and carbon sequestration. And livestock is a very important positive participant in that. I would say that we need to think, we need to be reminded about this when we have these discussions about livestock versus crops. It's not one or the other, the two complement each other, and you actually need both. The last number down there, that's a number from a study by that was done by some authors at FAO and other researchers. 86% globally, this is a global figure, of what is used to feed livestock is actually biomass that we consider not edible for humans. I mean, certainly grass is not edible, but that also includes things like grains or cereals that have been downgraded in terms of quality, that we as humans choose not to consume, that are also going to livestock. So surprisingly, a lot of the feed that is going to livestock is actually things that it's very sensible to do it, not only from an economic point of view, but from a development point of view. Next slide, please. And just to really emphasize again the importance of the feed industry, because we receive so much criticism about giving feed to livestock. And yes, of course, there is room for improvement. Yes, of course, there are things that we must do to reduce ever more the quantities of grains going to livestock that could be used for human consumption. But we also should give credit to the fact that a lot of what is currently used now are things that otherwise would need to go to the garbage and then create a methane problem in the garbage dumps if we did not use them for producing livestock. And we have in some countries, there's very ambitious targets for biofuel production. And when you produce biofuel, there is a byproduct, a very important byproduct that you need to find a way to dispose of. And happily, the livestock industry is there to take it up and use it and turn it into high quality protein. So really, such an important contribution to the circular economy. If we're communicating to the general public, I think it suffices to say that this is an incredibly important contribution to reducing food waste. Really, the livestock industry needs to, this needs to be better recognized. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting to the end of my presentation here, just to underline the point that we actually need livestock to be sustainable. And again, because of all these discussions about all the environmental impacts of livestock, and we haven't even talked about health. That's a whole other topic that I think also is another strong point for the livestock sector, but perhaps a topic for discussion on another day. But basically, livestock are there to fulfill a particular food production niche as part of our global food production system. So it is actually, if we are talking about sustainable food systems, it will not make sense to be talking about sustainable food systems if we do not have livestock as an important component of that food system. So I really want to push back against this notion that a sustainable food system, and this was a discussion last year by the Food System Summit, that you could very clearly see that the discussion was that to be sustainable, we had to reduce livestock as much as possible. And that's just absolutely not true at all. And I want to, Dale, if I very much could sympathize with your plea yesterday that the fact that we want livestock to be more sustainable does not mean that we should be, by definition, be decreasing livestock production. This is absolutely ridiculous. And it is absolutely compatible that we actually increase livestock production and for that to be more sustainable. So those are not incompatible goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so in conclusion, let me just say, why did I take you through all of this structure of the global associations? The global associations like mine are made up of members. And these members define the goals of the association. And if these members are saying that we need to be part of the solution for food and nutrition security, livelihood development, climate goals, if they say that we need to have stronger animal welfare requirements, if they say that we need to be more responsive to consumers, these are the things that then show up on the agenda for the global associations like myself. So I want to make the point that we have come a very, very long way in terms of the global livestock sector in the commitment to continuous improvement and sustainability. Many examples of work that is already underway can be found. I think they would be too numerous to list. I mean, we saw the incredible diversity, the multiplicity of excellent, very concrete programs. Dionys and Jörg presented some of them to you. These are all underway, but I wonder how many consumers know about them. And in the global agenda, I just want to, this is my final point, how are we encouraging in the global agenda for sustainable livestock, how are we supporting these initiatives that are already out there? And I think this is very important. Of course, it's a two-way street. We should also be having more support from these organizations and these associations and these efforts. But I think that it's also incumbent on the global agenda to reach out and also recognize these achievements that are underway, because it is only by working together and having a better attractivity between the different participants that we will have more, that we will better work together. Just having things coming from the global agenda or from FAO top down is fine, only up to a very limited certain extent. And I think the challenge for the global agenda is how do we better have a closer ties with the rest of the industry, whether it's a private sector or whether it's with the NGOs or or governments or research and academia. I think really the challenge for the global agenda is how to have better collaboration and better participation. And so let me stop my presentation there, and thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Shin, for this extensive insight into the different members of the cluster, private sector cluster, and what's going on. you put the finger on very crucial aspects, and you also raised a very important question that we will tackle during the panel discussion: how to make the best out of our partnership, the GASL partnership, how to reach out, how to be more proactive, more convincing, and to reach the right people, to do the right actions. You also raised a very important point that we will also discuss later: the multifunctionality of livestock, which sometimes tend to be overlooked in the whole discussion about greenhouse gas emissions. And now I'm quite sure that Emmanuel in his presentation will tackle this topic of multifunctionality and how to bring it into assessment, into the assessments, but also into labels, sustainability labels. So we will pursue this discussion with Emmanuel. Emmanuel, will you share your presentation, or is it Eduardo?
Eduardo, please.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot, Shin, and welcome to Emmanuel for the last presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, maybe you come a bit closer to your mic.
It's okay?
Yes, perfect.
So thank you to invite me for this excellent moment to discuss between us before October. And today I want to present Carbon Agri is the French program for farmers to boosting carbon initiative on farms, and especially in mixed crops livestock sectors. I work with Jean-Baptiste Dolé. A lot of people know Jean-Baptiste Dolé. He's the head of department of environment in IDEL, Institut de l'Élevage, a French livestock institute, and we work closer together to present the French actuality on carbon agri. Next slide, please. So I want to have two remarks before. Sustainability is very important, like some speakers said, and I want to demonstrate that there is an interest for farmers, and we want to participate at the decreasing of emission, but also we want to have all the possibility of sustainability in social, environmental, and also in economics parts. So at this time, France is in Europe, as a lot of countries, and we have goals, for the initiative in 1990, inventory of practice, and we decide to decrease emission, and we know where we are, and we have the first goal for Europe is Fit for 55, is to 2030 to decrease by 50-55. So it's an enormous gap for us, but we want to go in this direction. Difficult, but we want to realize that. So next slide, please. So the first important slide is here. If we make some studies in France, and on this slide we can see that there is no difference between production systems. Without maize, with maize, mountain or grassland, or there is the same milk carbon footprint emission. But the good news is there is high difference between efficient and less efficient farms. So So there is no people outside the goal. All the farm now will go in this process to decrease emission, and we can see on this schema it's possible to decrease by 18%. For example, when we see the top dish of the farms. So it's very important because sometimes in France, in other part of the world, we said that there is it's difficult to change, but no, we can see that it is possible with some level. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. No. So, as other people and Jörg said, we have a methodology in France, and the name is CAP2ER. Okay, is a French acronym, and is the assessment of and evaluation of performance on farms. And we have two big parts. One of GHG emission, okay, and also on carbon sequestration. We can see how it is possible to decrease with inputs on pasture, on feed animals, also with fuel and electricity. We can have some proposals, like, for example, no-till cultivation, and also power and equipment, new recycling water, for example, in milk refrigeration, and also to decrease the crop fertilization and crop management with the use of legume fodder crops. Some possibilities are very high with herd management, with improving productivity and a reducing number of unproductives with animals on farms. We can have feed efficiency for wash quality and yield, and also the main process to decrease is also manure management. First, with the time for cow or sheep or other spent in shed or pasture, and also we have the possibility to make biogas productions. First part. The second part is possible with carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration with cover crops. After to avoid bare soil, sometimes with agroforestry, but for example, in France, is grassland management, which is the most important solution for carbon sequestration with edge. So the first step with CAP2ER, with the 40 mitigation practice, is to decrease and to have a reduction of carbon footprint to 15 to 20%. Next slide, please. So for tomorrow, we have possibility, like some speakers said, we have feed additives, especially for methanes with tree NOP, tannin, algae, citrus. We have manure management, like also with additive, but we need, we are very, we have a lot of ambition with genetic, for example, and also with new carbon sequestration, because at this time we have some possibility to have meadows, to have grassland in some case with a lot of carbon sequestration. So we need to have scientific discussion about that, but we want to have a lot of possibility with carbon sequestration, with grassland crops. And for us, it's very important in France, especially because we have in the same time, we have to adapt our pasture or meadow or grassland to the climate change. And so it's very important for us at these times. Okay, next slide. That is the objective for us is how it is possible to upscaling low carbon transition, because as I said, we have European Union and France have a lot of ambition, and in 7 or 8 years, so we must raising awareness among farmers, and for example, we need to have a self-assessment in the first time, and after also simplified audits. We need to have simple audit on farms, not very long, not very difficult. For that, we need to have a training session, but also we need to recruit and to advise farmers in applying low carbon transition. We can see after the figures of how many farmers are engaged in this transition, but it is very important to have more and more farmers in this way. We need to have evaluation of them, to have money for to make advisor. To have an advisor to help farmers, and to communicate on initiative and on progress done. At this time is done, but we need to have more and more farmers in this way. And the objective is, in France, 0.5 million farms in France, so perhaps 90% of the farmers in France, or the totality of French farmers, and in Europe is 10 million farms in Europe. So it is very important to have a solution for that, because we need to have a lot of farmers to be on the objective, to be on the goals in 2030, and after in 2050. Next slide, please. Next slide. What is the carbon farming strategy? So we have a lot of questions. We can see in the first the 3 programs in France at this time. Low carbon dairy farm, en français la ferme laitière bas carbone, beef carbon, the European program, and also in sheep and goat, green sheep. Goat is want to integrate green sheep, I hope, this year. So we can who is contributing for upscaling, because it's very important to know who is the actor for this strategy, how it is possible to have assessment, evaluation for farm carbon performance, how it is possible to measuring progress done, and how it is possible to supporting farmers for applying mitigation practice, because we need, as I said, a lot of communication. We can see that. Next slide, please. So we can see on this slide all the partners, farmers are in the center, because we need to have a lot of association partners around. So the first is in the top with all the association with the 4 associations in France. One FNB is for beef industry, FNPL is for milk, FNEC is for goat, and FNO is for sheep industry. And we have also the particularity of to have a young farmers association with us, because it's very important for the new generation, the development of farming in France and also in Europe and in the world. After we have the chain, like we said in France, in French, interprofession, the meat chain, the milk chain, and we have CNA. CNA is my organization, and CNA is the first step of the chain, is the 4 association of farmers with some money, like Shin said. We have on the legal chain, we have a possibility to have income and legally tax, and we can use this money to in this program. After we have also once we say region, but it's like lenders engaged or committed to support this policy. After we have a very important part with some agri-food industry. The major industry are engaged in this program, and in milk and also in meat. And we have our principal partner for program research and supporting activities with IDEL and INRAE, the main institute, scientific institute in France. So it is very important for farmers to have all these members around us, and to give, for example, some funds, but also to go in the same way, in the same direction. Okay, next slide, please. So you know that, but is Cap d'Azur is working on a mixed farm in France, and it is 90% of the farm in France. We have some farms without crops, but only in the mountain, for like Alps, for example, with only livestock, no production of crops. But normally in France, it is the mixed farm of the livestock model in France at these times. So we need to have the two pasture and crops and livestock, and the exchange by manure, by feed and straw, and we have the production. So we need to have in the Cap d'Azur methodology what happens in these different parts and in the exchange of livestock and pasture. Okay, next slide, please. So what is the methodology? So the methodology is based with a lot of guidelines like LEAP and FAO, or with big organization like EDF or IMS. And but the scientific approach was made in LEAP to, for example, to know how many grams of CO2 by kilogram of milk of meat. So it is based on a scientific and universal approach. It is very important because we need to have a reference, and this reference is given by scientific approach, and we are certified by a third-part company, Bureau Veritas. On the other part of the slide, we can see the two main measures: carbon intensity of kilogram CO2 or methane, and by kilogram product of or hectares, and also the capacity of sequestration. And we have the four part of the farms we can observe. Feeding management, more important, crop management, manure storage management, and also the carbon sequestration with farms and with edge and grassland. So it is possible to discuss in the details of the methodology, but for me, today is important to say we have a methodology in France, and we can see how we can develop this methodology. Okay.
Emmanuel, may I just interrupt? We are starting to run a bit behind schedule, so can you maybe go to the conclusions or the main points, which are highly interesting, the next ones about the labels? Is it possible?
Okay, so okay, but I have only okay. So can we go to the next slide? Can we scroll my after, please? You can see. Okay, after. So it is very important is how it is possible for farmers to go towards the 6 steps. One is the first audit to cap the zone. After we on the farm we built an mitigation action plan. Okay, we applied on the farm a mitigation measure, and after we have the second audit by an external auditor. Okay, is to have to quantify the CO2 reduction, and we have the audit to certify the carbon reduction, and now they have possibility to have carbon reduction paid by some companies. Okay, and for example, we can have the next slide, please. So, for example, we have 4 examples of GHG reduction and carbon sequestration. And for example, with a reduction of for footprint in milk, 15%, we can have rewards in incomes, in money. For example, for 300 tons, we can have 9,000 euros. Because we have a discussion with big companies in France, and we have a possibility to pay 30 carbon tons, 30 euro, excuse me, by carbon tons. Okay. So just the next slide, please, and we can finish on time. The next, please. So at this time we have two projects. The project with 300 farmers, okay, for with a lot of tons, and the second project is more with a better level, with perhaps 1,000 farmers to 550,000 tons CO2. So it is very important for me to present that, because as we said, we need to have rewards for farmers and we have some objectives. It is possible for us to decrease GASL emission, but it's very important now to have some idea of the future for farmers, because as I said in the beginning, we need economic support, and that is an economic support for farmers. I want to stop here because it's very important. I haven't developed other part of the program with biodiversity, water use, etc., territories aspect, etc. But we have in this program also this aspect. But for me, at this time, I want to say that it is possible for farmers to decrease and to be participant in the way of all the program in France, in Europe, and in the world. And we want to link all the other program decided by the society, by the citizen, but we want also to have an economic possibility to do that with some incomes. So thank you for your attention, and excuse me for the long way.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I didn't want to be rude, but I just need to keep an eye on the time. So thanks a lot, Emmanuel, and I'm really glad that you put the finger on very important points. So the costs and the role of finances for the farmers. And that brings me actually to the first questions to the panel. So I would like to invite Jörg, Shin, Emmanuel, and Dionys and Dale to switch on the camera so that we see you. Thank you. Again, as yesterday, we have a men panel, no ladies. Unfortunately, none of the invited ladies could make it. So we invited ladies and they didn't make it. So that's why we end up with 4 men experts or 5. So that was just a parenthesis from my side, being a woman. My first question to the panel would be, actually, we have seen a few in a few presentations, more or less explicit links or hints about the costs and the finances. And my question would be, who bears the direct cost of these sustainability assessments? I'm not talking about the reward yet, as Emmanuel mentioned, but the costs. These assessments, they are costly, right? They are even more costly if they are linked to labels. So who bears the cost? Is it the farmers? Is it the industry? Is it the consumer? Is it evenly spread along the chain? I don't know who would like to answer first. Maybe Dionys or Jörg first? I don't know.
Well, I can answer that from my perspective. So the question is, who bears the cost of the sustainability assessment, right? Like yes. The baseline assessment. Yes. So in our case at the moment, we, as the company, we pay that. Like we kind of organize it, we pay it, we do it then together with the farmer. But actually at that stage, there's no cost to the farmer. Yeah.
At this stage, okay. Yeah. So these costs, are they pushed to the consumer or they stay with Nestle for the time being?
No, for the time being, it's with Nestle. Like, okay. Because of course, at the moment, it's a lot is about kind of pilot project. So we do a lot of assessment, but we don't do millions. We do like hundreds. So the cost is part of this development journey, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Who would like to answer? Dale, you mentioned yesterday about your program Origin Green, which is also linked to a sustainability assessment. So how is it in Ireland in your case?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and we're discussing it at the moment in a wider sense. In that we set up a group specifically on dairy, looking at, it's under our Food Vision 2030 process. So our Food Vision 2030 process is our 10-year agriculture strategy that includes sustainability. It's broader than that, but it includes a very strong chapter on sustainability, environmental sustainability, but it also covers the social and economic. But on the environment side, we were going through this group then looking how we can manage our dairy sector emissions, because our dairy emissions have been growing on the back of you know, increasing cow numbers. We have increased production quite substantially. As people may know, we had 1.3 million dairy cows before quotas in 2015, and now we have about 1.6 million dairy cows. So we've added about 300,000 dairy cows in 7 years, which is quite a lot. So within that context, we have to manage that. And it was interesting, we had the industry in one day, and the industry were kind of the view that it's hard to extract a sustainability bonus or premium from the marketplace. That it's very difficult to do that, because this was in the context of, well, who was going to pay for the additional costs that would potentially, you know, fall on the farmer to produce dairy protein in a more sustainable way. And we had an interesting discussion around that. And it was almost like, you know, the conclusion was, well, look, we have to do this, because if we don't do it, well, then we're not going to maintain our market share or our segments in the marketplace. But there was no, there's yet to be, I suppose, a very clear determination of where those costs should lie. Personally, I think it's going to have to be across the value chain. I think, you know, government in terms of public supports, I think industry are also going to have to play a role also. So what we are seeing, we're starting to see now in Ireland, some of our major dairy processors, they are starting to pay sustainability bonuses for farmers that take on particular practices on their farm. So I do think we need public supports, but we also then need these industry supports that closely align to talk to each other, be complementary, and to help, I suppose, drive that farmer behavior. So a very simple example, we have a drive now to use a different form of chemical nitrogen. It's called protected urea. So it's basically a urea form of nitrogen with a urease inhibitor on it. And that produces a lot less nitrous oxide emissions than the traditional form of nitrogen, which has been calcium ammonium nitrate. So our dairy processors now have sustainability programs, many of them, and they're paying a bonus, you know, for farmers that use this fertilizer type. Thank you.
Okay, Dionys?
Yeah, maybe I just can come in more from the industry, food and drink industry association point of view. It's very similar. I can only support what Jörg has said and what they had also mentioned. I think at the moment it's very much it's either the platform that pays for these assessments or the platform members pay for these assessments. And in future, probably the costs need to be shared along the value chain with all the members. So I think I see that also with our members, that there is a kind of an alignment, and it needs to go in this direction, that there is a cost sharing.
Thank you. Emmanuel, yes, for France or Europe?
France, actually, for farmers, to this methodology, we need to have one advisor on the farm. So that needs to have an invoice between the organism and the farms. Okay, but the level of the invoice is very low, because there is some subside with industry, for example, main milk industry, or also the lenders, or also the government. But we try to have a discussion with farmers about that, because when we have this methodology, it's very important, because it's a methodology of all the farms. it's for mitigation, but also for adaptation. That this time is very important to have solution. So perhaps we need to pay, but we can have some parts of the invoice paid by the other parts of the chain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in that sense, we cannot consider that this is a hurdle to move forward, because all of you are quite on the same line, that the costs for the time being are not pushed back to the farmers, so it should not be a hurdle to move forward towards sustainability. Dionys?
Maybe just if we just talk about the assessment, then I think that's what I mentioned, right? But if it's about really putting programs in place, continuous improvement programs towards sustainability, nowadays we talk about regenerative agriculture even more. I think we need to think about de-risking instruments. How do we de-risk this transition? And I think this is true for the livestock sector. It is equally true for the crop sector. And there is not there, of course, is again, there's the farmer, there might be the processor, there's the manufacturer, but there also is the de-risking industry, there is the reinsurance industry, there are the banks, the credit institutions, and so on, that can help to overcome kind of this risk of transition, moving towards more sustainable production systems. I think this is something that is only now emerging. Some of these, the insurance industry players, the banks, they are now starting to investigate this area, but they have not yet models. But if we want to have this transition happen fast, then we need to work on this quite quickly. So how do we, because it's not about moving one single farm anymore, it's going to be how do we move an entire sourcing district or entire regions. So we need to have incentives. And then again, that need to be properly connected with what is available in terms of subsidies from a public government, what comes in from the industry. So there needs to be a proper program to tail that.
Thank you. Jörg, you wanted to react?
Yeah, just to add one point on this, I think for the assessment, I think this is not such a problem. It's not such a big amount. But then when the activities come, of course, especially if it's a greenhouse gas reduction activity, which has a carbon value, then of course this carbon has a value. And eventually, of course, the farmer must be compensated. I'm sure the farmer, he wants to get paid for that. And then the companies who are using it, like Nestle, we want to have products which are actually carbon neutral. So there's a value in this, which will then be kind of passed to the consumer. I think especially for the farmer, the activities which are linked to carbon footprint will sooner or later, actually pretty soon, I think will have a very clear value per ton. I think Emmanuel, he said like the 30 euro per ton or the 50 euro in this range. And I think that's where then the market will start to play more and more. And this will accelerate some of the adoption, I guess.
I think that's a very fair point, because everyone's looking at this in terms of the carbon farming framework that the European Commission are going to propose. A lot of member states are looking at that. They're going to produce, something by the end of the year that will give us a greater idea of how carbon farming is going to work. At this point, we're not sure whether the likes of methane and nitrous oxide will be included. That is very much looking at CO2 and land-based emissions. But ultimately, I think it will move and it will transition, that it will have to include, methane and nitrous oxide. So as Jörg said, the marketplace will help support, farmers to make reductions in greenhouse gas emissions on their farm. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean companies that are operating in the agricultural space. I think there's a great opportunity as well to attract outward investment, into the industry. There's a lot of companies from a social corporate responsibility point of view will be very interested in supporting farmers to reduce emissions, for them to kind of mention it on their own books. For example, we have a forestry scheme in Ireland, and some companies outside of agriculture and forestry have paid farmers to plant native, tree plantations, and they're financially supporting them to do that. So that sort of thing, that sort of initiative is very positive as well. So we've seen it in forestry. So there's no reason it can't work in agriculture as well. But we need to have very robust benchmark data. We need to know exactly what the emissions on our farms are, because in order to do that, we need to be able to verify the reductions. We need to know what the accurate starting point is. And I'm not sure everyone is at that stage yet in terms of having that benchmark. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Before I give the word to Dionys, I just make you aware of a comment in the chat by Brian Lindsay about the LCA approach to quantify above and below ground sequestration of carbon. So just to make you aware, and that was based on a point in one of the presentations. So thanks, Brian, for that. Dionys?
Yeah, maybe just to add to what the previous speaker has just been saying, I think, yes, the carbon market will play an important role probably, but I think the food industry and the beverage industry is first and foremost interested in the insetting, because they have their own targets. They wanted to reduce the emissions. They wanted to see sequestration happen. So I think I'm looking forward to what the EU is preparing and what they will publish. But I hope that this is going to be very well connected to the existing subsidy schemes. And then maybe a second point, yeah, maybe there is room for others else than let's say the food and beverage industry, to come in with this to support agriculture. However, I think first and foremost we need to try to do this insecting. So I think.
I have a question now to the. We talk a lot about the environmental dimensions, and especially the carbon dimension, but all of you have tackled at some point that the two other dimensions should be tackled as well, or more captured. So the social and the economic dimensions of the sustainability, and that was also a point raised yesterday. So how can the three dimensions of the sustainability be captured, for example, in a label? Emmanuel, you mentioned the label Ferme bas carbone in France, for example. So how are the other dimensions captured in these labels, and how can they be communicated to the consumer, for example? Yes, Emmanuel. We don't hear you well, Emmanuel. Can you come closer?
Okay. No. We can hear me?
Yes, now it's okay.
Okay. Just a little point for the discussion for the point before. The price for farmers is 30 euro per ton, but the price for carbon buyers is 38. Okay, so because we need money for project developers and advice companies, so it's the real price is 38 and 30 for the farmers. Okay, so for your question, we actually work with all the labeling production, like red label in France, label rouge, to integrate the three parts of the sustainability in the package, and especially the environmental part with, for example, with the result of the Cap de Zère methodology. So at this time is not done, but we try to link that, because normally the price of the label in France and perhaps in the world are higher than the average price in the supermarket. So when there is this possibility, and for example, in meat, we want a goal to have 80% of the meat sale with label rouge. So we need to have a higher quality of the products, and inside we have the price of the integration of decreasing carbon emission, etc. So we need to make the link by the price of the product with the quality of the product.
Okay. Yes, Jörg, you want to react? And Shin, Jörg first.
Well, just on this point, you know, to include like the social, economical, and environmental aspects in a brand from a communication point of view, of course, this is difficult. So far, our brands, of course, they prefer to have a simple message on, maybe at the moment, before it was maybe on animal welfare, or then it's on greenhouse gas at the moment, carbon footprint. But I think this becomes, maybe if brands become stronger, like we see that, for example, in espresso, in our coffee brands, we actually, it kind of starts to stand for the holistic system. Like it's about the farmer, it's about the coffee, it's about the water, it's about the greenhouse gases. And I think it's a journey. I think that at the end, the strongest brand will be a brand which actually can, where people, when they see it, they think actually of all the aspects. They think it's a fair brand, it's a sustainable brand. This will be, I think, the strength. And I'm sure there are many companies are working very, very hard to get there. But at the moment, it is a bit of a focus on one element, but it's maybe also not bad to start with one element and to eventually to expand on it and to make it stronger and stronger.
I think it's very hard to do that just in the context of one label on a package. Like, I think, you know, if things expand in terms of, you know, QR codes potentially on food products that, you know, link back to stories or sustainability videos that can be more holistic, I think it's easier to tell a broader story in that concept. It's very difficult, I would say, to encapsulate everything in writing on a package in a supermarket or something.
Shin.
Yeah, I would agree, Dale. Basically, we've exhausted the ability to put more information on a label, I think.
Yes.
And putting it on a QR code and asking the consumer to go to a site afterwards to look at that can solve some of the issues, but, you know, still, how many of us will actually bother to do that? But I want to go back to, you know, the very start of the process, which is, you know, the need to have numerical targets and, you know, a scientifically valid foundation to measure performance and all that. There is that need, but that need also needs to be underpinned by global agreement on, for example, simple things as where are you starting your life cycle assessment and where are you ending? Because right now the problem we have is a lot of companies are making claims, many of them unverifiable, and then perhaps even worse, they're doing that on different methodologies. And this is something that absolutely needs to be solved, and this is something that the LEAP framework is actually trying to solve. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we need to have a better understanding of you know, a better agreement on the way we measure things. But just on the thing of labels, you know, I mean, there are, if you like, because I like to try to simplify things as much as possible, thinking at it from a consumer point of view. If you put numbers on a label and say that it's a greenhouse gas emissions number or something, then you're basically asking the consumer to pull out a calculator and compare numbers between different things. And is that really a wise strategy to be trying to follow? What does seem to have worked, for example, is labels based on practices. So we are very familiar with the concept of eggs from free-range hens, all right? And consumers understand that and actually are willing to pay some premium for that. And you know, that is certainly a way forward. It won't solve all of the issues, but when you get to more complex things like biodiversity, you know, things that are not so easy to put in numbers, or even if you put a number, what the heck does it mean? So we need to be a bit more open-minded about how to do these things. But having said that, we still need to have the rigor in the production practices that go before. But what we put on a label has to be based on that, but it's not going to be the same thing. I think that's what I want to say.
Dionys, you wanted to react.
Yeah, I wanted to react first about, just wanted to support, yes, we need to align on the way, on the KPIs and on the way how we measure these KPIs. And just I want also to make there the reference to the SDP of site platform, because it's exactly where we try to harmonize, we try to align on the indicators. We try to offer a solution that then is kind of all the dairy players can use, and we have one way of basically measuring it. But then there is another thing, and in terms of the communication, I agree it's difficult to communicate to consumers a number on GHG emissions and so on. And given the short attention span of a consumer to a product, and he has to decide and maybe a fraction of a second or maybe a 1 or 2 second whether she buys one or the other product. I think it's difficult to put that all on pack. I see there is some opportunity with kind of QR code and linking the products to a website or to social media and so on. And I think the more these systems get integrated, the more we can communicate. You know, you're putting things in your basket, your mobile phone is recording it, and after a while it brings you kind of advertisement and information about this brand and about the way how this product has been produced. So there are ways there, but I think, you know, the discussion or about the figures, the numbers, I think it's nevertheless, it's going to be important. It's important for the entire reporting of the food and beverage industry. Many have signed up to the science-based targets, but it's not only about the signing up to the science-based targets, it's also the ESG, the investors community, who has brought forward their frameworks, and they look very carefully now into the portfolios, into the companies. So they wanted to see, and they want to see that these figures, these numbers are underpinned with evidence. There is evidence that it can, like in a financial system, that is properly gathered, aggregated, and evaluated.
Dale?
Yeah, just very quickly, one point we haven't discussed is what about the consumers that go into a supermarket and they just buy the cheapest product? So there's a large cohort of consumers out there that take that approach. So a QR code or any sort of, you know, labeling around GHG numbers is not really going to resonate with that section of the consumer at all. And I think that's a big challenge. How do you get that consumer kind of more engaged in that sustainability debate?
That brings me actually to another question. There is also a fringe or a part of the consumers who mistrust industry products. So it's basically not the ones who buy the cheap products, but on the other end of the consumers or the other segments, or maybe the better off, and the ones who are very environmentally conscious. And for many people now, livestock has been tagged as actually harmful to the environment because the focus is so much on greenhouse gas emissions. So how can we win back the trust of such consumers, first of all, into the industry, but also beyond that into livestock as a part of the food system? How can we win them back, or at least not lose more? I don't know who wants to answer that. Jörg?
Yeah, no, actually, I have a bit of an opinion on well, a little bit on the previous one, what Dale said, also how to reach the consumer who is kind of, who wants to get the cheapest one. And I think a little bit also on your question just now, you know, I think this is where legislation has a role to play. We have governments which have a role to play. And if the government decides there's a certain minimum standard, like let's say if every farmer has to have a nutrient plant for his things, or there's a carrying capacity for his farms, and this is implemented in a country or in a region or whatever, I think this is a very important role. And because through legislation you can actually increase the level for everybody, for all the producer, then this becomes the minimum standard. And if this is done in a proper way and hopefully in a way which consumer also understand what the government tries to do, then this is at least one step in a direction where we can improve the sustainability across the board, at least in some countries where this is possible.
Yeah, then you come ultimately to this famous problem of people going over the border to buy products which do not follow the same legislation and rule. And we will have to vote on that in September, in Switzerland, about this industrial livestock production initiative, but this is another chapter. Dionys, yes.
Maybe just one word to that. Eradicate the worst and then improve the rest, right? And that goes in the same direction what Jörg was saying. Their legislation has a role to play. So eradicating the worst and then show that there is really continuous improvement on the rest, and show really the value. And I think livestock brings a lot of value, be it from a nutritional point of view, but and also from a landscape and from a cultural point of view.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Dionys, because a few times we have talked about the multifunctionality of livestock. Shin has mentioned this in his presentation. Yesterday we talked about the triggers of the current crisis, so the corona and then the war in Ukraine. We see, especially with the war in Ukraine, the role of fertilizer, of manure, which is one of the roles of livestock. And this is hardly thematized, the role of manure for crop production, for soil fertility. How can we make this more prominent also in the mind of people? Because many people, they just don't see the link between these aspects. Shin.
So I think this is part of the problem that we as an industry need to collectively work on. And that's the communication of what we produce. Because so far, what we have been very successful at doing is communicating that we produce safe, hygienically perfect product, right? At no time in history has meat and animal products ever been as safe to eat as now, okay, all right? And at no time in history has it ever been as cheap and abundant and plentiful. And the consumer just thinks that he can just go to any store and he can have that at a moment's notice. And he doesn't understand that to produce animal protein and dairy products, there's a lead time of a few years to produce a product. And he doesn't understand that there are all these chains involved in having that product produced, and that you participate so many different parts of the economy that you are actually using materials from different parts of the economy that you actually would be wasted. So for example, the question of feed. A lot of the feed that is used are things that actually would become an environmental problem if we were not feeding it to livestock. And I think that this is part of the story that we need to better tell as an industry to consumers. And of course, we have a problem with manure in that we don't universally close that nutrient loop. We need to do that. We absolutely need to do that. And then we need to communicate that so that people will give us credit for it and be willing to pay more for those products. Now, that's all fine in an economy where we have the luxury, and we do in Western countries, developed countries, to say that that is now our priority. But what do you do about countries in which their biggest concern is getting the next meal or having enough calories for that day? And so it's a very, very complex question. And the solutions that we have here to do that, and we said the legislation, yes, but what about the poor who are not living in our circumstance? And that's maybe the majority of people on the world right now. More than 50% of the people in the world are not in the fortunate situation that we are in. So we must also keep that in mind. So it's a very complex question, but I think just to cut to the chase, what are we not doing enough? I think as an industry, we're not talking enough about what we are actually doing. And we need to give more information.
So that would be also a message to your question, Shin, what can GASL do better or contribute better? Emmanuel and then Jürg.
Two small response. The first to communicate. It is very important for us, for farmers, to open the farms to citizens. So for example, in meat industry, from 4 or 5 years, we decide a special operation. The name is Made in Viande, and we want to open all the chain for citizens, for customers. And we have a lot of people coming on the farms. And for example, is my second response, for example, for manure and fertilizer, we can directly speak to citizens. What is the possibility on the farms? We can use a lot of fertilizer, for example, nitrogen fertilizer, but the cost is high, actually, with Ukrainian war, etc. So we need to have manure, and for example, we can show the gap between manure fertilization and in the past chemical fertilizer. So it is very important for citizen or customer to see in a practical way how it is possible to decrease inputs on the farms, and also how it is interesting at these times with climate change to have an increasing of organic matter in the soil, because with a lot of with the problem of water, of not rains, it is very important to have more organic matter in the soil, because it's more humidity, more capacity for the plants to good yield, etc. So it is for me. We need to link all the action we do for carbon, and also to show practically how it is possible. So I join Shin to say it's very important for GASL and also for my part for farmers to develop some communication on farms to show how it is possible to go in this direction with a lot of possibility, like I said. Thanks.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Jürg, and I keep an eye on the timing. We are behind schedule, so we will need to close the panel. But Jürg, yes.
Okay. No, I just would like to, exactly what Emmanuel said. I think the best thing which we can do is really to open the doors of the farms and let consumer come and see it. And there are so many great examples where actually consumer absolutely love to see it, to see all the good things which are being done. However, we also have to be a bit critical as a sector. I have been in many countries. I have seen farms which are really not good. Farming system which are really not sustainable, where the feed is coming from 10,000 kilometers, where the manure is going down the drain. I think there we have to be critical, and I think this is really systems which we have to address. And I think Nancy, what you mentioned, this initiative in Switzerland, it should be about voting about the size of the farm or the production system of the farm. I think this is a total fair discussion. I think this is a discussion which we have to have as a consumer, and we must be able to explain to the consumer that what we do is right. And if we even don't feel comfortable ourselves, then maybe we also have to push a bit in a direction where we say, no, this is not really the system which we support. We want something else. No, thank you.
Yeah, maybe if I can say not a concluding word because it will be Fritz's job, but maybe to round up this panel. Sometimes personally, I wish that we put the livestock back into the center together with the farmer, but not all the light should be put on the livestock, but on the whole system, and taking into account the rest of the system. Many of you have highlighted this interaction within the system. We need to have a system approach, and we need to consider also the crop as part of the solution, but also part of the problem. It's not always everything about livestock. It's about the food system as a whole. And that was actually also the topic of these 2 days discussion. We focus on livestock, but actually we want to know how to make the food system more sustainable. So just maybe to remind all of us that livestock is linked to other aspects of the farm and the food system. We could spend, I'm sure, more hours discussing these different points. Unfortunately, we have to go to an end. So I would like to thank all the panelists for their contribution, for being here and sharing their views with us. Today was more the focus about industry and private sector. So that was a very interesting insights after yesterday's country focus. I hope that most of you or many of you will be able to join the main meeting in October in Ireland. I also just make you aware of additional comments in the chat, very interesting comments from Miriam. Just read it before we leave. And with this, I would like to close the panel and hand over to Fritz. Fritz, are you ready to make a summary? Challenging, I guess.
Yes, thank you very much. I decided not to summarize what has been discussed today in detail as I tried yesterday. We also heard that Shirley will not be here for the closing remarks. So I think I put these two things together, and I will try to make the link from what we have heard yesterday and today to our October meeting in Ireland. And I think listening to yesterday's and today's presentations, they all were really excellent and very much to the point. It showed me that we have come a very long way in the livestock sector in tackling the environmental and other issues. And I take the liberty to go back a little bit. In 1997, we started the livestock environment in development in Wageningen. And we worked on this program, which was financed by some governments and FAO till 2005. And we published this Livestock's Long Shadow, which was more a linear approach to environmental issues on livestock, which was a little bit narrow. And we improved this, and 2010 we published Livestock in a Changing Landscape, which actually was the start of the global agenda. And now we wanted to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the global agenda last year in Switzerland. This didn't happen. So we will definitely celebrate in Ireland. And when we look what has happened, and I take the quote from Shin, where he said, what can GASL do? I think when we take GASL 10 years ago and look at it now, we have come a very long way. Of course, there's a lot of potential to improve, but we have actually brought together multi-stakeholders to look at the issues. We have developed a very good discussion ground. I think this meeting yesterday and today shows that there is so much going on, but we have somehow not been able to transport this to bodies like the Food System Summit. I think livestock has not received a fair deal. And even in COP, livestock is often not treated correctly and not scientifically correctly. So I think there is still a lot of work to be done for the global agenda. And we have seen that we have to do this in partnership. So I sincerely hope that many of you will join us. We may approach some of you for inputs in Ireland in October. And I'm very optimistic when I see the way we have come. There are so many programs going on. There's so much effort to improve the sustainability of the livestock sector. And I think we have to much better communicate this also to the policymakers, to governments, but also to the consumers. And in that sense, I'm very confident that we will have an excellent meeting. We will, Nancy and I, we will develop a report on these 2 days. This report will be available, and it will be also reported in a presentation then in Ireland. With this, I'd like to hand it back to Nancy by thanking all the speakers, to Nancy, to Eduardo, to Lavinia for the organization, and also to Shirley for the opening remarks. And I hope to see you all in Ireland in October. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fritz. And I would like to give a special thanks to Fritz, because he's the one who was the main organizer of this 2 days meeting, inviting people, thinking about potential experts, dealing with the last minute changes in the program. So I would like to thank you very much, Fritz.
Welcome.
And yes. And of course, Eduardo and his team, Lavinia, for the great support as always from Rome. So many thanks. And of course, thanks to the panelists. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a small gift, but I hope to see you in presence in Ireland in October. Yeah. So many thanks to all.
If I could just say, we're very much looking forward to having you all in Ireland in October. Eduardo and I are working hard to put together a program, with some extracurricular activities as well in the evening. So it won't all be about livestock. You will get to experience some cultural aspects of Ireland too. So I hope as many of you as possible can make it. Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to it, Dale. Thanks a lot. And of course, many thanks.
Thanks to Dale, Nancy. Thanks to everybody. As a representative of the GASL agenda support team, I am really happy to see these developments, these regional meetings going on. And I really want to invite you to Ireland, because Dale and the government of Ireland are really preparing a very good meeting. So we hope to see you there. And there you will have also more opportunities to show what you are doing, because this is the meeting. What the meeting is about showing the actions that the livestock sector is taking, and also the pending challenges that we need to address. So many thanks for your participation in this meeting, and also in Ireland.
Thank you, Eduardo. And thanks to the audience for participating, listening, and also bearing with the late or the delay in the program. So thanks a lot. And for your comments also in the chat and questions. So I wish you a nice rest of the day and look forward to seeing you soon, either in Switzerland or Ireland or wherever.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.